and I believe this, we can have the makings of a team that nobody in our conference wants to play at some point. It's just where we start, where we end. It'll be interesting to see.
This is the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing. Now, here's your hosts, Paul Fritchner and Adam Baum, with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.
Welcome into the second episode of the Sean Miller Podcast. Paul Fritchner, Adam Baum, John Fanta of the Big East, and of course, Sean Miller, the head coach of the Xavier men's basketball program. We want to thank our sponsor and the presenting sponsor of this podcast, Deer Park Roofing, and we want to thank each and every one of you who have watched this show, subscribed to the show, listened to the show over the last week. The feedback has been great. And fellas, last week, Sean, Adam, and I, we got to talk about your history and your personality and your past and some of the stories through your coaching career and how you got involved in basketball. But we thought for episode number 2, since John Fanta was in town, we kind of let our hair down a little bit and have some fun today. So, John, thanks for being on the show. You are the first guest on the Sean Miller Podcast, and it is quite an honor.
It's an honor to congratulate the Sean Miller Podcast on making it through the pilot episode and getting renewed for the whole season. Very impressive, the returns, the immediate returns. And it's a thrill to be your first guest. I mean, what an honor this is.
We've flown you in. You're here. You're not on a Zoom.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that. I know we paid for it. It's great to have you here. And you think about it, it's, I think, the ultimate compliment when you have a show. Everybody remembers the first impression, the initial, who's first, right? And my first guest is you. So it goes without saying, a healthy level of respect for what you do for a living, and obviously working with you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just enjoyed it, and I thought it would be an appropriate Big East beginning and a great initial show here. First guest, John Fanta. So thank you. It's
a thrill. I'm grateful. I loved working with you for a year. That was quite the experience over on the field of 68, which now this podcast is going to come right at.
No doubt. Competition is in the air. There's no doubt about it.
Good. We're coming for you, John.
Although I've heard through the grapevine that this was teased at the conclusion of episode 1. I've been told that there were some things said.
Yeah. I would just say this, that, reflecting back on the year off, and I have gotten a lot of questions about, hey, in the 1 year where you weren't coaching, in between your time at Arizona and before things began at Xavier, what did you do? What did you enjoy? And it was almost like they asked me the question as if we were relaxing or I was relaxing. And when I look back at that, it was some of the longest, hardest days really of my time working, because you're doing the work not only of yourself, but several others that are on that podcast. And, the Arch and Sean, duo, I love him. He's my younger brother, but let's face it, he carried about 10% of that water. The 90%, I had to pick him up and carry him to the finish line. So just the review of the field of 68, enjoyed the experience, was grateful to be on it. But, I worked my ass off and did the work for a couple guys that are still on that podcast, and I don't really know if their work ethic was what I expected. That's all I'm going to say. So when we now launch our own podcast, the Sean Miller Podcast, and it's competition, I'm confident. I'm confident in coming right at that show. No doubt about it.
I feel challenged.
As you should. Was the first time your guys' first interaction, was it prior to the podcast, or was it really?
I never met him in person until when? When was the first time we met in person? Because we were always on a Zoom, right, in different locations.
It was probably here.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to say.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't work together in person the whole year that we were doing the shows.
Right.
Again, I had never met him, and I was asked the opening night of the 2021-22 season, right? Was it opening night? No, it was the Champions Classic.
Yeah.
Champions Classic, and I was assigned that night as the host of Field of 68 After Dark, and I was working with Sean and Archie Miller. For the first time, they were working on the network. And so I got a call from Jeff Goodman in the morning who said, I don't know exactly how they're going to be. I think they know their stuff, obviously. Obviously, you know your stuff. But he said, can you try to figure out a way to lighten them up? And I said, well, that won't be a problem at all.
It's that stereotype again.
Yeah.
You never smile, all that stuff, right?
Right. So I thought to myself, I can do two things. One, I can unveil that I'm a huge Browns fan, huge Cleveland Browns fan. I'm
That'll
a Clevelander. For all those listening, I'm a diehard Cleveland Browns, Cavs, Indians, now Guardians fan. And I thought to myself, at the end of the show, we've got to do Miller time. And the way I thought of that was, in my fridge, there were a couple of different things, but there weren't many beverages.
Yeah.
And on my door that day, I opened up my fridge to grab something, and I looked at the door, and there was just one glass bottle of Miller Lite.
Speaking to you.
And I thought, this is what we're doing tonight, and that's going to get them to lighten up. And here's how much these two guys know about basketball. I asked them a question about something. I said, it's Miller time. I was able to finish the entire Miller Lite while the two of them were answering.
I'm not shocked by that.
And Arch says to me on the Zoom, did you just chug that? I go, I didn't need to chug it. Keep talking about the Pac-12.
Yeah, we had a great time, though. And in all seriousness, that was, for me, and Adam asked me a question recently on this podcast, like, what would you do if you weren't a part of basketball? And I have a real honest answer to it, and that is, quite frankly, I'm not sure, because it's never really been a part of my life where I don't have it except for the 1 year. And what the Field of 68 did is it allowed me and Arch, but speaking for myself, just to stay engaged in the game, have a great time, see it from a different lens, and watch all kinds of different coaches and teams and players. Where oftentimes when you have your own team, you really don't get that opportunity.
Guys, we paid Coach Miller, whatever. I'm not sure how that deal worked. But
A Jack Lambert autographed jersey. That's what I got.
Okay.
That's a fact.
Chris Mack, who's now entering his second season, somehow got renewed for his second season with Field of 68. Chris Mack gets paid in Applebee's gift cards.
By choice?
By choice.
Those are his demands.
By choice, yeah. I said to Mac, I was like, what's your favorite restaurant near Xavier? You got to like the precinct. We all love Jeff Ruby's, right? And Mac goes, hey, man, I love Jeff Ruby's. It's all good and stuff, but you're talking to the wrong kind of guy. I'm an Applebee's guy.
Again, Mac, we love him here at Xavier, and he's a good friend and an excellent coach. But, again, I'm looking at the Field of 68 and just, we got to put in a good, honest. One thing about Arch and I, we woke up early in the morning, we worked at it, and we tried to be prepared so that when you and I were talking, that we could really have a great exchange. Yes. Correct?
And that's absolutely
agree?
The truth.
Yeah.
You were always prepared, always prepared, the most prepared of anybody that I worked with.
Did doing the media grow on you through that year?
I've told these guys this many, many times. It gave me a completely different perspective and respect for everything that these guys do media-wise. On a very serious note, I couldn't believe the amount of work, the preparation, the research, the double-checking. Because when you're on as a media member and you say someone's name wrong, you could say 200 people's name right, but the only one that matters is that one you got wrong, and it's a forever moment. It's almost a sign of a lack of respect, right? So you don't realize that when you're being the person interviewed, because you always know your team, the names of players on your team or people that you're competing against, but you're not asked about a team that's in a different region or a different area of the country and who that coach is and what they do. So I found a new respect for just the amount of work these guys do, the difficulty of it, how bright they are, and then the pressure of being right when you say something. I felt that for sure.
Yeah. And I remember when you got hired, it was a weird situation where I was still covering the team, and I had never met you. I think we had talked on the phone one time for a story that I wrote, but I found myself going and watching podcasts with you and your brother or the Field of 68 to try to learn more about you and get a sense of your personality and things. So those were really helpful to me when I was, hey, there's this new guy coming in. I have to form a relationship with him. how can I do that when I haven't got the chance to meet him yet? So I watched podcasts.
Yeah,
I watched
nice.
they were
you
good.
go. Again, the gift that keeps giving. Can I revisit one topic?
Yes.
Here we go.
When I was on the field of 68 and just in that year, because my perspective was the Pac-12, I had been in the Pac-12 for 12 seasons, Pac-10 and then Pac-12. Felt like I knew it really well. Players, history, coach. And I always felt that it was underappreciated. And I really tried to take the mantle that year of trying to give that conference the respect that they deserve, whether it be Arizona or Washington State, because, I would make the argument that Washington State playing them in Pullman, and it's not what everybody thinks. It's very difficult, and Kyle is a great coach, et cetera. And it constantly fell on deaf ears, but it's just amazing that 2 years later, it's like there's no conference.
No.
It's for me, it's almost sad because there's so much greatness from that conference that it almost gets no respect now, as if it never happened. And I don't think that's fair.
Has anybody checked in on Bill Walton?
No.
Have we done a status
Somebody
check?
Has to do, somebody
can't
has to
be
check
well.
in on
So
Bill Walton.
I had a kind of an off-the-grid conversation with him, and I think the way he put it to me is, I am going out when the Conference of Champions do.
Wow.
So this could be maybe the final year for him. I don't know. Can't speak for him, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me.
It's driving the bus every day, the realignment talks, and we could go down a rabbit hole and talk about it for hours, but I'll say it in seconds. It's not what we've all grown to appreciate and love about college sports. The Pac-12 has a rich tradition, a championship tradition, great programs. I mean, the battles between UCLA and Arizona, and you think about Oregon and Oregon State a couple of years ago, what Coach Tinkle was able to do on that magical run, Washington State. I mean, you could go on and on and on. And for me, it's sad to see that league will not exist. I understand that those schools are going to be fine. They're going to find their next home. But I will say that in the midst of the football-driven world, and there's no question that's the case, talking with your players today, two of them said, well, what's great about here is that basketball is the show.
Right.
Basketball is the driving force.
And in our conference.
And that was the next point of, we are entering a year in the Big East that is as anticipated as a mid-1980s season in the Big East Conference. The coaching, the players. You're talking about multiple All-American caliber talents. The growth in players, the home court atmospheres, the fan bases. The Big East is everything that you fell in love with college basketball with. That's what the Big East is. It makes you, it's like Cheers. Everybody knows your name inside the Big East bar.
Yeah. I've heard this, and as the realignment has happened, and I know there's so many different ways to look at it, but here we have to look at it through our own lens, and that is how grateful and excited we are to be a part of the Big East and the future of it. Where you're playing in a round-robin league, 10 games at home, 10 on the road, a 20-game season, playing everybody, playing, like you'd mentioned, whether it's the city we're playing in or the home court we're playing in. I look at it as the best of the best for our players, for our teams, and then it all culminates in Madison Square Garden, which, you and I talked about that earlier, that our conference tournament isn't at a new location. It's not a revolving door location. It's just at the same location, the most iconic place you could ever think of, dream of playing a basketball tournament or game, Madison Square Garden. So I think we're all really excited. I know the coaches that I've talked to that are in the Big East all look at it the way we do, and we're looking forward to our future.
To go to the Big East tournament championship game in your first year back here, I mean, to play in a building like that, somebody with that rich tradition, everything like that, I mean, what was that like?
It was amazing, to go there on that first night where you're there before any games begin. You're in the city. Yeah. In our case, we were coming off of a hard-fought second-place finish. To be 15-5 in last year's Big East, you had to feel pretty good about it. But getting into the city, you want to stay there. You don't want to be the team that heads home early All of your fans are there. You can feel the pageantry of the tournament. And for us, we almost exited after game one. We had to really rally to play against a dangerous DePaul team, and then Creighton. And then reason that we don't talk a lot about being in the championship game is the championship game was over in about 15 minutes, real time, about 5 minutes game time. You know, Marquette's depth and tenacity and who they were on that particular night, they overwhelmed us. So that's the only negative about being in that Big East championship game.
Not to get too much into it, but just kind of curious looking back on that championship game. Did you feel like when you say like it was over in 15 minutes of real time, did you see like that the players were tired after playing 3 games in 3 days, or was it the overwhelming depth of Marquette, or what? How did you feel like it played out that quickly?
Well, first, it's the quality of opponent. I mean, they were an excellent team. They were playing really, really well, especially at that period of time, led by a great guard, Tyler Kolek, who it's what John just said. He didn't leave. He's back. All right, he's the Big East most outstanding player, and he returned. So I think that says all you need to know about Marquette this season. But their depth wore us down, and that was our Achilles heel a year ago. And what's interesting about our team this year is, and I hope that what I say is true because we're 0-0 at this point, we've lost a ton of experience, and there's nothing we can do to make up for that. But we are a deeper, more balanced team this year than we were last year. We are overall deeper. That was last year's team's weakness. So that's up to us as a coaching staff to get the most out of that. One of the things you try to do when you have a deep team is get great value in practice every day because you got great competition each and every day. Sometimes a year ago, because we're playing only 6, sometimes 7 players, you had to be careful how much you practiced. So that doesn't mean we're going to stay out there for 3 hours a day every day. But I think you know what I mean. When the person in front of you and you're going against in drills and in real scrimmage action is a good player who's trying to get more opportunity in games, it has a great way of making your team tougher, more resilient, and maybe improve throughout the year. And that's what we have to get out of this year's depth.
The Sean Miller Podcast is brought to you by our trusted friends at Deer Park Roofing. Protect what's important with Deer Park Roofing's industry-leading training, expert attention to detail, and responsive service. From commercial and residential replacements to roof repairs, gutters, and more, request a free estimate today at deerparkroofing.com. That's deerparkroofing.com.
Sean, when so much is different, you look at what you accomplished here last year and what you have this year. I mean, Cam Craft's healthy. He missed a lot of time. He didn't play that much last year. But you have one guy who was a consistent, reliable part of your rotation last year in Desmond Claude. When that much is different, how do you handle expectations? Like, is that a dangerous game to try to think about what you could be, what would make this season a success? What's your mindset like that?
I think, Adam, what I have learned is, it's just hard to go down that rabbit hole this early. Even a year ago, it ended up looking how you wanted it to look, but there are many, many times, especially in October, November, that all of us were completely unsure of how it was going to go.
Yeah.
And so I think you try to keep your focus on what you can control, and that is coaching these guys, holding them accountable, teaching them, bringing out the best in each of them, knowing that this is what we're not good at, let's improve it. This is what we are good at, let's acknowledge it and make it great. And that's the process that I think a lot of teams at this year are going through. When you start to look at, we're playing Houston and Purdue in November, I mean, that can keep you up at night. It's just, let's keep our eyes on what we can control. Let's have a great week. Let's make sure that everybody is pointing in the right direction, because it's that process that I think inevitably wins out. And I believe this. We can have the makings of a team that nobody in our conference wants to play at some point. It's just where we start, where we end, it'll be interesting to see. I have no qualms about saying that I believe we're playing in America's #1 conference this year. The returning talent, the accomplishments of last year's teams, the coaches, and then the new coaches in a 20-game schedule. It will be maybe the most difficult schedule that I've ever coached.
The scheming in the league is just amazing to watch. and I'd love to hear your reflection on this, but there are 2 games last year that come to mind that you played in that the quality of basketball, it's hard to believe it was college basketball. Because let's face it, there are some college basketball games that can be more difficult to watch than others when it comes to shot making.
Yeah.
Not only is this league really good, great, aesthetically, it's really pleasing. I was here for that Sunday afternoon Xavier Marquette game. Unbelievable basketball game that you felt like with 3 minutes to go, you weren't sure who was going to win.
Right.
And both teams deserved to win.
Right.
There was going to be a loser. That was one. The second game last year where I just felt like something came out of your team where you willed yourselves to win on a night where not everything went right was your home game against Creighton.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Creighton played an A half. They were just on all
We
cylinders.
were lucky to be in the game at halftime. Yep.
But then you guys you kept clawing, and you made the finishing plays in the last 4 minutes of the game. But Greg McDermott, Shaka Smart, now Rick Pitino in this league. Ed Cooley's still in the Big East. I mean, it's the talent, but I wonder how you go about when you're watching these teams on film and watching these coaches, but then how much does it change within a game?
So last year, John, entering the last media timeout of the game, 20 of them, right? 20 Big East games. We either were 2 possessions up, 2 possessions down, or in between, less than, right? So in other words, up 2, up 3 points, up 6 points, down 6, down 2, down 1, in 16 of the 20 games. And I think that says everything. And we really try to talk to our team this year about that, because that was a season in which you won 15 of those 20 games. So you recognize that, you have to be on it. You can't ever enter a Big East game and take that go to the first media timeout and say, let's just see how this is going to go today, because you're going to find yourself in a hole. You have to be ready game in, game out, day in, day out, regardless of the opponent. And, if you're a young player, isn't that the conference that you want to play in? Isn't that the type of conference that's going to bring out the best in you, whether you're a coach, team, or a player? And I believe that our conference is now positioned to do what we did a year ago, where whoever enters the tournament, the NCAA tournament, it doesn't matter where you finished. You forget UConn finished 5th place. You can make a deep run just because you're so battle-tested. So it's easy to talk about that right now. It's not as fun to talk about it when you're in it, because you have to fight and you have to get off the mat sometimes on a losing streak after a tough, close game and be ready for the next one.
I think one of the themes from last year's team was a lot of times you come out of the second half not as strong as clearly you'd look down at you on the sideline and you're losing your mind at the first media timeout, or you're burning that first timeout and you're thinking to yourself, wait, we just talked about all this at halftime. And that's the last timeout that any coach ever wants to take is that, hey, we just talked about it 2 minutes ago, timeout. So as the season went on, though, obviously got a whole lot better at that. What was your message? Was it just the guys locking in more? Was it a mentality change, or was it something schematically that you felt like you needed to change coming out of the half? Was it the opponent adjusting, or how'd you work on that?
So what we try to do, Paul, and we've done it for a long time, is break the 40-minute game into 10 4-minute wars, 4-minute battles, whatever you like to call it. If you think about it, all college games are the same in that there's a media timeout, first dead ball under 16, 12, 8, 4, all the way down first and second half. So if you look at each one of those 4-minute segments as its own game, you want to be consistent. You don't want to be up 6-0 in one of those segments, down 10-2. What that reflects is a team that plays the game like this. Those teams who are tough to defeat, who are consistent, who improve, not that you're going to be perfect, but what you learn is you want to be consistent and hard to beat in each one of those 4-minute battles. So the battle you were just reflecting on is what we call the 6th 4-minute war. That's the first 4-minute segment after halftime. And why it's different is your guys are in the locker room, they're sitting down, they're reflecting on what just happened, sometimes real good, sometimes real bad. sometimes in between, but it then restarts almost like restarts the game. It's different than all the other 4-minute battles. So sometimes you have a team that doesn't handle that situation as well. And for us as coaches, when you run into that, what I try to do is get them back out onto the court maybe a minute earlier. Really assign our staff to make sure that when they enter the court, that we're all business and we're running and we're getting ready for what's to come. And then sometimes, you get them to the huddle a little bit earlier. And now, okay, here it begins. The sixth war. This is about us being the best we can be. Like we talked about at halftime, you have to block out. You can't give these guys second shots. Let's make that our focus. So, by the way, there's only so much you can do because those 5 players that are out there, they are the tone setters. But I think all coaches feel the same. You want to be a consistent team regardless of the time and score.
If I was to say halftime, because I think a lot of fans place a lot of importance on halftime. If I said halftime was overrated or underrated as a head coach, which would you pick?
I would say vastly overrated because there's only so much you can change. I think it's more of a review, an accurate assessment of what just happened. This is what you as a player did well. This is what you didn't do well. Here's why. This is what we, through the identity of our own lens, the stats that mean the most, that indicate what the score is, that we need to do better in the second half, and maybe here's why. But it's really hard for all of us to go deeper into that because you practice so much. You are who you are. You know what you want to do, and it's about trying to do some things better, but very seldom do you just wholesale change. You may change your pick and roll coverage, or you may play less zone and more man if you're a zone team, et cetera. But for the most part, I think you just try to really be accurate with your players of giving them the sense of what just happened.
It is a chance, though, to lose your mind in private if you need to, though, right?
And I would say that all of us hold like a couple bullets in our gun. If you call the halftime of the 37 games or 30 games, if you're going that direction too much, which I think we've all been guilty of, certainly me.
Yeah.
At some point, guys are like, yeah, you yell at us every halftime, right? So I think you want to make sure that you save it for those real key moments. One of those moments in last year's season for us was at halftime of Kennesaw State, first round of the NCAA tournament.
I remember what you said.
I think there was just some real relief that we were in the tournament. We felt good about the seed we had, and what we weren't experienced in dealing with is how good every team in the tournament is and how eager the underdog is to beat you. And by the way, you're on a neutral court until the underdog starts to win. And what you then sense is, oh my God, this is like an away game. That's the tournament. The experience of the tournament teaches you that. Last year, we almost learned that in the first half of Kennesaw. And by the way, they were a really good team. So I used one of those bullets at that halftime. I was so out of breath that I didn't think I could catch my breath to begin the second half. I had nothing to lose, right? We were either going to lose or we were going to advance, so I just really tried to motivate maybe in a different way.
Yeah, I remember you said you called them one of the softest teams you've ever coached.
Yeah, I tried to really get on their nerves.
No, but I think, when we recorded episode 1, during downtime, you asked me and Paul a really interesting question, and that was, if there was a moment or something that stood out to us from last season. And I thought about that, and I think the thing, and you sort of touched on this earlier, but I remember it was after Big East Media Day, and it was like a Sunday afternoon practice. And I was here watching, I think it was in the auxiliary gym, and you came up to me after practice and you said, I have no idea how we got picked to finish second in the Big East. And my point there was, what I saw after that was I saw you really take stock of all the things that you didn't like, that you weren't comfortable with, that you knew you needed to improve on. And I guess I'm curious, you're in this situation again right now. Is that like an uneasy place to be, or is that where you sort of love to be? Like, hey, I'm going to find all the warts, and we're going to do everything that we can to make them right.
I think it's both uneasy and it's why you want to coach, right? You have to be able to help these players. You have to be able to help them be successful. And being successful in college basketball is your team has to win, right? So I think, the first part is it definitely is uneasy. All of us wish we had the most talent, the best depth with no injuries in the schedule that you think is perfect. But I don't think any of us really have it to that level. Maybe one or two teams can live that life during a regular season of a college basketball year. But the rest of us, I think, have to really try to be the best we can be, work with what we have, teach, learn, and grow. And one of the great rewards in coaching is that deep down you know that our team is much better at the end than we ever were at the beginning, regardless of the record, because usually the record will take care of that for you. And I think that's what this year's excitement really reflects. So much unknown, so much new, that it really is going to take a lot of our staff and our players to come through this and be the best we can be.
Who are a couple of those players this year that you're excited about seeing that development from? Obviously, a lot of people watching this know the expectations that are on Des Claude's shoulders and the accolades he's already gotten in the preseason from picks from writers all over the country. But there's 10 new faces, right? There's a lot of new contributors on this team. So who are a couple of people that you're really looking forward to, and for fans that are going to watch this Xavier team this year, what are you expecting out of these newcomers?
There's a lot of ways for me to answer it. I'll just give you, a couple things that are fresh on my mind right now. I've been really impressed with Trey Green. He is a small guy in terms of stature, but he has a big heart and a super high skill level. A year ago, I was very concerned about Sule's stature and physique. He's not a big guy. I would say Sule for most of the year weighed right around 170 pounds. The physicality of the Big East worries you, game in, game out. Those road trips, playing in cold weather late in February, early March, is he going to be able to hold up? But the thing you learn with someone like Sule is basketball is still a game of skill. And when you're that skilled, it's amazing what it makes up for. I feel the same way about Trey. I think he has a special skill, shooting. He continues to learn and grow in a very quick way. And I think he's going to be a real key contributor to our team. He'll be a fan favorite because he's a small guy and he's a great shooter. So that's one thing I would say. I think Dalen Swain is another young freshman that when you look at him today, we'll all laugh, I hope, a couple years down the road and think about where he was and look at him today because, John saw us practice today. He's 6'7". He can really handle and pass the ball. He's very, very versatile. And I think the sky is the limit for Dalen. We just have to help him get there. Those are two guys that were in high school a year ago, just two. In terms of our transfers, we've talked a lot about Quincy and Davion, our backcourt, two experienced players. We haven't talked a lot about Abu Usman. And what I love about Abu is he doesn't play the game because he's tall. I really believe he plays it because he loves it. Since he came on campus in June, he hasn't missed a single day. Not a weight workout, not a skill workout, not a 5-on-0 team practice, and then, of course, the real practices, scrimmages, games. He's been available, and he has practiced with great effort. And he has a competitive spirit that I think his team really needs. So he played for a really good coach at North Texas. Very, very great defensive coach. Grant was at North Texas, and you could tell. So Abu, he brings a defensive mentality, a competitive spirit, an older physicality to our team that when you lose Zach Fremantle, Jerome Hunter in the summer, you lose Jack Nungy, from last year's team, who can you replace those guys with? So I love Abu's unique experience.
John?
Well, I am a Trey Green fan right off the top because of the feel for the game, his ability to shoot the basketball, but the motor on him is what Xavier fans are going to like a lot. He is beyond his years.
His instincts, too. Like, he makes some passes that I'm like, how did you see that?
Well, I think the crazy thing is when we're sitting at practice, we're sitting there and there's a group of us that sit up there, 4 of us every day, and we're sitting there watching. And I can't tell you how many times we sit there and there's a play that Trey makes, or it's a shot, or it's a step back, or it's a clearance, it's a pass, whatever it is, and we all kind of look at each other and go, whoa. And we kind of keep a tally of those, right, at practice, and you're thinking 4 or 5 of those every time they go out.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think it can be difficult for a freshman in general, nor alone a freshman who comes in and on the team, you have veteran guards. The fact is, Quincy Oliveri and Davion McKnight are really veteran, poised guards who make plays, and Trey's got to guard Davion and be challenged by him, and he's handling it well in practice. So I was impressed with him. I'm with you on Dalen Swain. What stood out to me is physically he doesn't look like a freshman, and you could see the growth. What I was thinking about during practice today was how a year ago Desmond Claude came into the room that we're recording this podcast in, and he was well behind Colby Jones. Colby Jones, who, by the way, will hit me up on Instagram every couple of days. We'll check in and say what's up. He was confident, beaming with happiness, ready to go, had everything figured out, and you could tell he was coming in the room that day. They did an interview together because he took Dez under his wing. And now I love seeing Dez a year later clearly having taken a lot of the things that Colby told him about, and now, as he told me today, it's time for me to take that torch. Yeah. And that's a lot for a quote-unquote sophomore, but he is so much more than that, and I just think that the growth of Desmond Claude, you guys are in the lab every day, you're in the room every day. I really believe that Dez is going to surprise a lot of teams and people when they face him this year, because he has done a magnificent job of transforming his body, his mind, his game in the last 7 months.
He has. He has really worked hard, and I'm glad you pointed out something that, all of us really want to happen here at Xavier, and that is you learn from those who came before you. Yep. And, Colby Jones, not because he's in the NBA, but just because of the type of person he was here, the type of student that he was when he was here, and obviously the type of basketball player that he was in each of the 3 years that he was here. He's the standard. He's a two-way player. He cared as much about who he was guarding in the defensive assignment and responsibility as he did how many points he scored. He tied Sule Boom in leading us in assists last year as a 6'5" wing player. He became more confident in himself, improved his shooting through his own hard work, and he was the consummate teammate and emerged as a quiet leader. As you guys know, Colby isn't a guy who talks a lot, but he was so great in leading by example day in, day out, and then showing his teammates in a game what to do and how to do it. And then he became more sure and started to use his voice. But the impact that Colby has moving forward is what you just said. Dez knows how to do things in large part because he simply was Colby's teammate. He watched him, he listened to him, he followed him. And that's a forever moment. And I think that's what the great programs have, where those that are together, they never really completely separate from a year ago, 2 years ago to the following year. So it's cool that you said that. I feel like that's the case. And, the thing for me is you would watch those guys a lot of times on film, and if it wasn't for their jersey number, I had a hard time telling Dez and Colby apart from each other. Very similar in stature and movement and size and really hair. Style to some degree, So I do think it was great that Dez was able to spend that time with him.
Oh, I'll give you one more. The Lithuanian Light Show. I'm trying to get this nickname to stick on. Gitas Namik Shah. Yeah. What I've come to realize about him early in the preseason, he battles and he does all that little stuff that you need people to do. I think he'll be a fan favorite at Xavier. I think he might lead you in rebounds. I also think he might lead you in fouls because he doesn't ever give up on a play. But I've been really impressed that just like his work ethic and how he never gives up on a play.
And Gitas, so there's no confusion, he's a transfer, right? Because he played at a university in his home country, Lithuania. And so he's a little bit older, battle-tested, experienced, like some of the other transfers that we have. But when we brought him in and when we were watching him and as we were recruiting him, glue guy, somebody who a lot of different types of teams would love to have because he knows who he is. He does his job, plays a certain role. He's a winner, and we're thrilled to have him.
And I would say being here at practice today and getting a chance to do some sit-downs with players, that Lazar Djokovic quickly has become a favorite of mine, not only in the upside and in everything that he can do on the floor, versatile, athletic for a guy that's at his size. Talked about the job that you did with Lauri Markkanen at Arizona and how much that inspires him and what he can become. But I said to him, so how'd you get from Serbia to Xavier University? And he said, well, a lot of people recruited me, but what Xavier did, I love this story. What Xavier did was they came to me as a full staff and spoke with me, but they didn't act as if they were recruiting me because of what I was doing, had been doing with the World Cup team, the U19 World Cup team this past summer. They recruited me as if, which is the case, they had known me. They had known me. They had known what I had done. Whereas other staffs were jumping into the water. That right there shows you the power of this staff and what Coach has done. That spoke to me because that's what I like to call next level recruiting. There are ways that you can get your chili around here. There's also ways that you can be able to bring in a prospect, and that's going the extra mile, an extra way, if you will, to be able to show a player of what they can be in your system. But also, I really appreciated Lazar telling me that story because it gave me a glimpse of his eyes. As much as you would like him to play for you, he's also looking at his potential stops and destinations. And I'm excited to watch how he develops because I know that's something that you preach to your players. It's clear that when he steps on the floor, you can sense that there's so much different ability there.
He has a lot of ability, and again, excited. That's what's exciting about our team. It's a really unique group, right? 10 new players, 6 freshmen. 2 of the 6 are international players. One of the 4 are international players. That's a transfer. That's Gitas, which you just brought up, Adam. And we go from here. Cam Kraft would probably be the last player that I bring up in terms of talking about this year. He's only been back with us for a little over 3 weeks, not yet a month. And he sat out a lot from a season-ending knee injury, surgery, rehab, recovery. And I think he's making great strides. Every day he's out there, he's a little bit more sure of himself. He looks more fluid, more confident in his movement. And one thing about Cam, when he's at his best, he really can make three-point shots. He can score. And in today's world, you can never have enough firepower shooting the ball.
The Sean Miller Podcast is brought to you by Deer Park Roofing, and their company motto is Protect What's Important. Deer Park is not just another storm-chasing roofing company. They're invested in your community and truly care about the people in it. You can trust them to do the job right. Deer Park has highly trained professional technicians who make sure your residential or commercial roofing system is installed correctly and quickly. For a free estimate, visit deerparkroofing.com today. That's deerparkroofing.com.
Well, John, I know you have a flight to catch. I appreciate you taking a few minutes today and sitting here.
It's a private jet, right? That's what we got him.
So, look, let me end it, since it's my podcast, my name on it, just with something that I want to create with the guests on the podcast, all right?
Okay. Yeah.
First thing that comes to mind when I bring up a name or a topic.
Okay.
Rapid fire. You
Yep.
ready?
Right.
Cleveland Browns.
On the rise.
Pittsburgh Steelers. Come on.
Yeah. Well,
Speak.
The worst of the worst. The worst of the worst.
That's so offensive.
Take that terrible towel and put it in the back of your closet.
All right. Jeff Goodman.
One of a kind.
The Big East Conference.
Meatballs, prayer, and hoops. Religious. It was founded at an Italian restaurant by Dave Gavitt in Providence,
Okay.
in the back of an Italian restaurant, and premier in basketball.
Xavier.
The premier program in the Cincinnati area, an elite basketball powerhouse with some of the best fans in the country, and a program that prides itself on tradition but holds itself to a standard year in and year out, and has had an amazing, amazing tree of coaches through the years. Not only amazing coaches, but highly entertaining people.
I had a couple more. I think I might have forgotten here.
It's all right. He's going to be a recurring guest. You know he is.
You got one more for me?
When you retire,
Oh,
many years ago, many years from now, because you're a young guy, I get it.
That's right.
At this stage,
Yeah.
where would you retire to? Where would you live?
Cleveland, Ohio? No, I'm just kidding. The beautiful lake. Have a lakefront view. Well, that's a great question. Jersey Shore. Yeah, I would go.
Jersey Shore.
I would go to. Yeah, I would want a shore house somewhere in Asbury Park. Be able to just sit back, hit the boardwalk on a Friday night, head over to the Stone Pony for some entertainment. Yeah, either the Jersey Shore, enjoying a slice, good Italian food. I like it out there. Still stay close enough so I can get to different hoops games, because that's New Jersey's home for me, guys. So I get to anytime the Garden's got a game, which the Garden has a ton of games. I can get to the Garden. That part's never going to leave me. I think my wife's going to want to go down to Naples, which is where all our grandparents are at. So I mean, I'm not going to sit here and deny Naples. I'll take a night at the Royal Scoop. I'll go over to Doc's over in Naples for any of you Snowbird Xavier fans. There's got to be some of them that are listening.
Oh, there are some. Yeah.
So call me in for Naples. I'll gladly split time between Jersey and Naples, Florida, with an occasional visit to the Dog Pound. And I would bring up, it is a dream before all this, wherever life takes us, one Brown Steelers game with you.
Yeah, we'll do it. That's
One.
Definite. We'll definitely do it. We may bring Arch along if he can.
Not sure if we'll
along.
both make it out alive, but we're going.
We'll do
We're
it.
going to make that happen.
well,
He's not allowed to bark, though, for that.
Yeah. So I got one more question for you. If you could eat pizza at one place, where would you go?
Wow.
Favorite pizza?
It's got to be Frank Pepe's in Connecticut.
What part
Frank
of Connecticut
Pepe's.
is it?
So there's a couple
New
of
Haven,
them.
right?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. If you're playing in stores, there's one about 15 minutes away after you get through the long and winding roads like you're Jack Nicholson in The Shining in the heart of January. But Frank Pepe's would be one in Connecticut, okay? But for those going to the Big East tournament, I'm trying to be helpful to your fans in New York
go ahead.
City.
Yep.
I would go and get a slice at Patsy's or John's on Bleecker. Either
Okay.
one of those.
You're on record.
Great pizza. Head over there. Xavier fans will love it.
John, thanks for being my first guest on the Sean Miller podcast. Again, it says everything. We flew you down here to do it in person. Not all guests are going to be able to be here on person. We wanted our first guest to make sure that you're physically here. So thank you. And, again, I kid about the Field of 68, but you guys are awesome. Some of my favorite guys in the world, and learned a lot in the year that I was with you guys. And yeah, so.
The Sean Miller Podcast. You will learn something new every single episode. A pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Can't wait till we do it again.
Absolutely. Thanks to everybody for watching. Make sure you subscribe at Sean Miller Pod. Find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places. You can find clips of the show there. Subscribe on podcast platforms. And thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsor, Deer Park Roofing. Thanks for watching, everybody.
This has been the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing, with your hosts, Paul Fritchner and Adam Baum. Join us again soon for another episode with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.